In the high-stakes world of corporate power, where influence often overshadows morality, one man's arrogance became his downfall. No one expected justice to strike where money ruled. Yet when an elite executive crossed the line, the world watched in shock. His words, laced with deep-seated racism, targeted hard-working black employees who had dedicated years to the company's success. What started as whispers in the boardroom turned into a nationwide outrage, forcing Donald Trump to make a decision that stunned everyone. A man known for his controversial views found himself at the center of a moral reckoning. But was this about justice, or something far more strategic? It all started within the pristine glass walls of one of the biggest corporations in America, a company whose influence reached the highest circles of power. Employees of all backgrounds worked tirelessly, believing in the promise of equal opportunity. Among them were black workers who had climbed the corporate ladder through sheer dedication. Yet behind the luxurious office doors, an ugly truth festered. Whispers circulated about a powerful executive, a man who believed he was untouchable, openly demeaning black employees. At first, his words were dismissed as mere off-the-record comments, but soon, they became impossible to ignore. The incident that changed everything happened during an internal meeting, one that was meant to discuss the company's expansion strategies. The executive, a towering figure in the corporate world, spoke with absolute authority. His words, however, carried something far more sinister. In a moment of unfiltered arrogance, he dismissed concerns raised by a black employee, belittling their contributions and making outright racist remarks. Laughter from some of his colleagues followed, but the atmosphere shifted as a chilling silence took over the room. The few black employees present exchanged glances, their shock quickly turning into quiet rage. News of the incident spread like wildfire. A leaked recording surfaced, exposing the executive's racist tirade to the world. Social media exploded, with people demanding action. Hashtags flooded timelines, calling for accountability. Prominent black activists and celebrities spoke out, condemning the company's inaction. Employees within the company, both black and white, refused to stay silent. Anonymous sources began sharing more accounts of discrimination, painting a disturbing picture of workplace culture at the highest levels. The pressure was mounting, and the company's PR team scrambled to contain the damage. As the controversy gained traction, all eyes turned toward Donald Trump. Known for his history of controversial statements and policies, many speculated that he would dismiss the outrage as another overblown scandal. Yet this time, the stakes were different. The executive in question was not just any employee. He was a key figure in a business empire closely tied to Trump's own network. The decision he made would not only shape public perception, but could also alter his standing among both his allies and critics. At first, Trump remained silent, a move that only fueled speculation. Political analysts debated whether he would intervene or let the scandal fade. Some believed he might defend the executive, seeing the backlash as an example of cancel culture. Others argued that with the upcoming elections, he could not afford another racial controversy attached to his name. But as the protests intensified and major news outlets covered the story relentlessly, the pressure became undeniable. The White House received multiple inquiries, and companies associated with Trump faced growing scrutiny. Behind closed doors, conversations took place. Advisors weighed the pros and cons of taking action. Some argued that firing the executive would signal strength and a commitment to justice. Others warned of alienating a powerful corporate ally. Meanwhile, Trump remained unpredictable, known for making last-minute decisions that often defied expectations. Then, after days of speculation, the announcement came. In a dramatic turn of events, Trump publicly condemned the executive's remarks, calling them completely unacceptable. The decision to fire him was swift, sending shockwaves across the business world. But was this a genuine act of accountability, or a calculated move to protect his own interests? The story was far from over. The aftermath of the firing sparked new debates, and not everyone was satisfied. Some saw it as a long-overdue reckoning, while others questioned the timing. Was justice truly served, or was this just another strategic move in a world where power dictated morality? The news of the executive's firing sent ripples through the corporate and political landscape. Some celebrated the decision, hailing it as a long overdue stand against racism in high places. Others, however, saw it as nothing more than damage control, a carefully crafted move to silence critics without addressing the deeper issues. But one question lingered in the minds of many. Was this just the beginning, or would it end here? As reporters dug deeper, more unsettling details about the executive's history began to emerge. Former employees started speaking out, revealing that this was not an isolated incident. They shared their experiences of workplace discrimination, detailing how black workers were often overlooked for promotions, their concerns dismissed, and their voices suppressed. Some recalled instances where the same executive made inappropriate comments about race, yet no action was ever taken. It was now clear that this was not a one-time slip-up. It was a pattern, and the company had allowed it to continue for years. The public wanted answers. If this executive had been behaving this way for so long, why was he only being held accountable now? The pressure on the company intensified as more black employees came forward with their own painful stories. Some shared how they were subtly pushed out of opportunities, while others spoke about the silent fear that hung over them whenever they dared to challenge authority. The firing of one man, though significant, was not enough to erase years of injustice. Meanwhile, Trump's decision continued to spark debate. While some applauded his move, others remained skeptical. Was this a genuine stance against racism, or was it simply a way to protect his brand from controversy? Analysts dissected every word of his statement, trying to determine whether his condemnation was heartfelt or merely a strategic play. The media ran endless discussions on the topic, with commentators on both sides offering their perspectives. Some pointed out that Trump had rarely taken a strong stance against racism in the past, making this decision all the more unexpected. As the backlash grew, the fired executive attempted to defend himself. In an exclusive interview, he painted himself as the victim of a witch hunt, claiming that his words had been taken out of context. He accused the media of distorting the truth and blamed woke culture for his downfall. But the damage was already done. The leaked recording spoke for itself, and the overwhelming testimonies from employees left little room for doubt. His words had hurt real people, and no amount of damage control could erase that. Despite the executive's attempts to shift the narrative, the company found itself in deeper trouble. Lawsuits started to emerge from former employees who claimed they had been subjected to discrimination for years. Legal experts weighed in, suggesting that the company could face serious financial and reputational consequences. Major investors began reconsidering their support, worried about the long-term impact of the scandal. Inside the company, leadership scrambled to contain the fallout. Emergency meetings were held, PR teams worked around the clock, and executives debated how to regain public trust. Some pushed for a complete internal investigation, while others wanted to move past the controversy as quickly as possible. But the problem was not going away. The world was watching, and people demanded more than just empty statements. Activists took to the streets, organizing protests outside the company's headquarters. Signs demanding justice for black employees filled the air, and chants echoed through the city. Social media remained ablaze with discussions, with hashtags calling for further accountability trending worldwide. This was no longer just about one executive. It was about a system that had allowed racism to thrive unchecked. At the same time, pressure mounted on Trump to do more than just fire one man. Some called for new policies to prevent discrimination in workplaces nationwide. Others demanded a more direct acknowledgement of the racial injustices that had long plagued corporate America. The situation was evolving beyond a single event, turning into a larger conversation about race, power, and responsibility. Yet, despite the public outrage, there were those who defended the executive. Some high-profile figures argued that he was being unfairly targeted, claiming that corporate America was becoming too sensitive. Certain media outlets framed the situation as an overreaction, questioning whether the firing was truly justified. This created an ideological divide, with one side pushing for meaningful change while the other resisted what they saw as an attack on free speech and corporate independence. But for the black employees who had endured years of discrimination, this was not about politics or corporate agendas. It was about justice. For them, this was a defining moment. Would this be the spark that led to real change? Or would it fade into yet another forgotten scandal? As the protests grew louder and the media's scrutiny intensified, the company found itself at a crossroads. Would they finally take accountability for years of discrimination, or would they attempt to sweep the issue under the rug and hope the outrage died down? Public relations experts warned that ignoring the issue could lead to long-term damage, not just for the company, but for the corporate world as a whole. This was no longer just about one racist executive. This was a test of how far corporate America was willing to go to protect Black employees from workplace discrimination. Under immense pressure, the company released a statement, claiming they were launching an internal review to ensure that such incidents never happened again. They promised diversity training, new policies, and a commitment to creating a more inclusive workplace. But for many, these words felt hollow. How could they suddenly claim to care about racial equality when they had ignored years of complaints from Black employees? At the same time, Donald Trump's involvement in the situation continued to be a topic of national discussion. Some saw his decision to fire the executive as a sign that he was trying to distance himself from racial controversies, particularly with upcoming elections in mind. Others speculated that he had been forced into making the decision, given the overwhelming public backlash. Political analysts debated whether this move would impact his standing with voters, particularly within Black communities. Would they see this as a genuine effort toward justice, or would they view it as another calculated political move? Meanwhile, the fired executive was not willing to go down quietly. He began making rounds on conservative news platforms, insisting that he had been unfairly targeted. He claimed that he was the victim of a politically motivated attack and that his words had been misinterpreted. His supporters argued that corporate America had become too focused on political correctness, and they used his firing as an example of what they called cancel culture, taking things too far. But despite his attempts to shift the narrative, the movement against racism in the workplace had already gained too much momentum. More employees from different industries began speaking out about their own experiences with discrimination, turning this into a national conversation. Social media continued to be flooded with personal testimonies, exposing the deep-rooted racism that still existed in many corporate spaces. The fallout from the scandal also had financial consequences. Several major investors pulled their support from the company, worried that their association with such a controversy would damage their own reputations. Stock prices fluctuated as uncertainty loomed over the company's future. Behind closed doors, high-ranking executives scrambled to figure out how to restore their credibility. Some board members even considered resigning, fearing that the scandal would permanently stain their careers. For the Black employees at the center of this controversy, the fight was far from over. Many of them felt that firing one man was not enough to fix a system that had allowed racism to thrive unchecked. They demanded systemic change, real policy shifts, and a commitment to ensuring that no Black employee would ever have to endure what they had gone through. Their voices were growing stronger, and the world was finally starting to listen. As the situation continued to unfold, the question remained: would this moment lead to real change, or would it become just another corporate scandal that faded away over time? The answer would depend on whether those in power were truly willing to challenge the structures that had protected racism for so long. As the dust began to settle, the world waited to see if this was truly a turning point or just another controversy that would eventually be forgotten. The company, now under intense pressure, announced a series of changes meant to address systemic racism in its ranks. They promised to implement stricter anti-discrimination policies, establish a diversity and inclusion board, and create a safer environment for Black employees. But words alone were not enough. People wanted action, and they wanted accountability beyond just firing one executive. Black employees who had suffered under the toxic corporate culture demanded a seat at the table. They wanted real influence over the changes being made, ensuring that these promises were not just performative gestures. Some of them, emboldened by the national conversation, began filing lawsuits against the company, bringing forth years of ignored complaints. Legal battles loomed on the horizon, threatening to expose just how deep the problem ran. At the same time, Trump's involvement in the situation continued to raise questions. While some praised his decision to fire the executive, others pointed out that he had never before taken a strong stance against racism. Was this a true shift in his views, or was it merely a strategic move to win favor with certain voters? His advisors remained tight-lipped, but political analysts speculated that the controversy had forced him into a decision he would not have otherwise made. Despite the company's promises of reform, activists and public figures continued to push for broader changes across the corporate world. This was no longer just about one company or one racist executive. It had become a wake-up call for industries across the nation. Companies that had long turned a blind eye to discrimination within their ranks now found themselves under scrutiny. Employees everywhere were speaking up, demanding justice, demanding respect, and demanding a workplace where they could thrive without fear of racism or retaliation. But as time passed, the media's attention slowly began to shift to new scandals, new controversies, new headlines. The protests died down, the social media outrage lost some of its intensity, and the world moved on. Yet for those who had lived through this experience, the fight was far from over. The black employees who had exposed the truth, who had put their jobs and reputations on the line, knew that real change would only come if they kept pushing. The executive who had been fired disappeared from the public eye, his career in ruins. Some speculated that he would attempt to come back, rebranding himself as a victim of corporate politics. But for now, he remained silent, a stark reminder of what happens when power and privilege go unchecked. In the end, this moment served as both a victory and a lesson. A victory because one powerful man was held accountable for his racism. A lesson because true justice is not achieved with just one firing, one protest, or one headline. It requires constant vigilance, courage, and a commitment to change that does not waver when the cameras turn away. For the black employees who had endured so much, this was a step forward, but the journey was far from over. And as history has shown time and time again, the fight for justice never truly ends.